And welcome back to the Steampunked Out Nemesis Gear YouTube channel. Roger here with another how-to video for leatherworking. Those seem to be the most popular, and so I kind of look back at some of the old stuff that I've got. In the future I'm hoping to revamp some of that with the newer equipment so it's a little bit easier to see. But for now, let's go with something new. Should be a fairly quick video, but today we're going to talk about finishing leather edges and how important it is to get these edges to a professional finished state, and some different ways and some tips and tricks that'll save you time. So let's get zoomed into the workspace here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Alright, so I've got some different kinds of different thicknesses of leather here. And for the leather edging, it's mostly going to be important for your veg tan leathers, but it can be used on some pre-dyed like chrome tan or oil tan leathers as well, especially if it's thicker and stiff like this. And what we're trying to do is we want to finish these edges when you cut. Well, it doesn't matter whether it's strapping like this or if you're cutting organic shapes out of your leather. The leather, the thickness, especially with some of this thicker stuff, you're going to end up with sharp corners on here. And what we want to do is we want to round these corners off, and this is especially important for things like belts. We want these to not catch on things and to slide through the belt loops easily and stuff. And so the first thing that we have to do is to prepare these is to take off this sharp corner right along the edge. And to do that, you're going to use an edge beveler, and there's a lot of different brands, different types. And they come in different widths. For something like this thin 5-ounce leather, you're going to want an edge beveler that's going to take off. It's going to have a smaller slot right here in the middle, and I'll kind of show you some different. Let's see if I can get close in on these. And there's some different widths of thicknesses on these. And then it might be kind of hard to tell there, but each one of these, the blade is in between, right in there. And so what this is going to do is going to allow me to run down the edge of the leather and take the corner off. And for thinner leather like this 5-ounce, you want a tool that is going to have a narrower width in between, and it's only going to take off a small amount of that corner. And these little prongs on the side, that's like a depth gauge. It's going to guide that to not be able to take a whole lot off. So we're going to hold this at about a 45-degree angle, and it's just going to slide right along the edge here, and then take off, this little corner. And we want to do this on both front and back, just like that, really easy. And the goal with this, the reason I say we want to use a thinner one is because this leather isn't that thick to start with. So if we go with something like this that's got like a really wide gauge on it, and then we take off, like I can't even get it on there because it's so thick I can't get it all the way off, but all the way down onto the leather. What we're trying to do is take the square edges on here. We want to take that off and just take that square edge and just take off a little bit like this so that it's a little bit more rounded instead of being that sharp square. And if you do that on both sides too much, then you end up with a point, and that's counterproductive. So we want to take the edge to something that's a little bit more rounded like this. So with the thinner leather, we'll use a thinner tool, and then with something like this, or like if you're doing holsters and you may have 2 layers of this together, where that's glued and stitched or riveted like that, then you may want to use a bigger gouge like this that takes off a larger amount of leather when you run it down the edge. And these are all hand tools, so for belts this might be a little bit much for this leather here, but so you get the idea. We're just trying to take off and round these corners off. Now there are some other tools to do this. The hand tools, if you're just starting out, are going to be more than acceptable for strapping or for organic shapes. For organic shapes, you really are going to have to use the hand tools for this, and these are going to allow you to go around these corners that, and you can do that on both sides. The idea is that we're just trying to get this sharp corner off to have a nice kind of rounded, gentle transition between this edge and this flat, so that the point gets rounded off right along both edges here. And then once that's done, we can now burnish this with the burnishers. And I'll show you those. We'll get set up here and I'll show you some different burnishing techniques. Alright, so I've got a couple of strips here prepped up, and I've already edged these. And so these are ready to be burnished for demo purposes. And there's a couple of different things that you can use for this. You can use just water, works fine. I'm just going to spray this first one here. There's advantages and disadvantages for each. So if I get this, a little bit damp, then this leather becomes a little bit more pliable. And then we're going to use our burnishing sticks here. And these, you can get, this is like the first one that I got from Tandy, and it still works fine. It's not too bad. They come in like these little nylon versions of a bone folder here, and so this edge is for burnishing, and then it has some different widths, different gaps in here that work as well. So I don't know if you can see how deep those are. And then this one is, I believe it's made of cocobolo, that I purchased online, and it's just a little better. It's got, it's got some different shapes there. But all of these will work fine. You can even use just a stick, that you've made yourself, and and smoothed and sanded. And so what burnishing does is we're actually using pressure and friction to to compress the grain on this. And so if you have like a stick like this that you've made for burnishing or whatever, you want to use hardwoods for sure, and something with a smooth, even grain, so that it doesn't compress in different, if you have some grain in the wood and some of it's harder and some of it's softer, it's not going to compress right. But you can actually burnish the wood itself, and this is a finishing method that I use when I make my wands as well, is burnishing. And you probably can't see it in there, but it'll start to get a shine to it, and it's where you've compressed that grain. And that same technique works with leather as well. So if we get the leather damp, and then we run our burnishing tool over the edges of this, and again, this is just friction and a little bit of pressure. It doesn't take just a ton of pressure. So water does work not too bad. I'm going to try to zoom in a little bit and flip this back and forth. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. So it's probably really difficult to see. But this is starting to, it actually almost is starting to get a shine to it, and that's what we want. Water works okay. There's the difference between the two edges. So this one has got a rough finish, and this one is where I've started to burnish it. And you can feel the difference. It starts to feel smooth. And you can continue working this with water, especially as it gets a little bit drier. With water, I like to let it get where it's just starting to dry out a little bit, because you don't want it too pliable. But the advantage of doing water is, once this is dry, you can still dye this. So usually if you're doing a burnish, you want to wait until you have dyed the leather. If you're working with veg tan leather and you want to dye it and you want to put a finish on it. So burnishing is like the last step. I'm skipping that here just for demo purpose to show you how to burnish. Well, with water, you can get away with doing this before you dye it, and the leather will still accept the dye pretty well. There's a few instances I've had in the past where it wasn't going to be very easy to burnish the edge because of the piece that I made. So it's possible to do this before you dye it, if you use water. If you use something like this gum tragicant, or we just call it gum trag, now this works very well for burnishing. I like to let it kind of start to dry a little bit before burnishing. And there's different ways to apply this. It's fine to use your finger on this. The downside of gum trag is I find that this can interfere with the dye absorption process. So if you're using gum trag, you definitely want to wait until after you've dyed the belt. So with belts, it's usually not a problem. It's just one strap of leather. You dye it, you put your, clear coat, your finish, everything on that you want, and then you can come back and burnish it later. So this starts to dry pretty quick, and then you can feel it's kind of slimy, and it'll start to dry out a little bit, and then it's the exact same process. We're just using friction and a little bit of pressure. And what we want to try to do is find the slot on our burnishing tool so that it allows it to touch both this top edge as well as these rounded edges, so that it fits nicely into the groove. If I put this like into the really large groove, then what you end up with is it only touches this one edge. So if I put it in one that's too thin, then it's only touching these corners here, and it's not really doing a good job. So again, we're just gonna work the friction on this a little bit. And that's already starting to get nice and shiny. Again, I don't know if you'll be able to see the difference here. So this is a burnished edge. It's starting to get nice and shiny, nice and smooth. And this is with the gum trag. I do like the gum trag better than the water as far as finishes go. But again, like I said, if you get little fingerprints and stuff on your leather, that will it's very likely you'll be able to see that, because the dye will absorb differently on this spot than on the bare leather. So it's one of those that you have to be really careful with, and try to use it only after you dye the leather. Once the dye is absorbed in there, I've not had any problem with getting a little bit of gum trag on the finish or something like that. You can't see it, it's fine. It just wipes off, and dries and does its thing. It's fine. But it's just beforehand, it seems to change how the leather absorbs dye. So the other thing that you can use is beeswax. And I've just got a big chunk of beeswax here, and this is pretty popular as well. It's tough to do by hand. So if you rub the beeswax on the edge, and then you start burnishing, you can get this burnished in. And this actually can be used in combination with the water or with the gum trag. With this, this is the water one that I've done. So I can rub this on there and continue to refine this edge, and this beeswax does help kind of seal it up and smooth, and it'll get nice and shiny and finished. But it's doing it by hand is really tough. But if you've got access to a drill press, then it actually can be one of the best ways to do an edge, because it's a lot faster. And if you're working with hand tools, it really doesn't matter. I would actually recommend the gum trag, but if you can get a drill press, then I'm going to take you over to my drill press setup and show you how beeswax can be used to do this a lot faster. Alright, the first thing that I want to show you are these. These are burnishing sticks as well, but they are actually made on a mandrel so that they fit inside the drill press here. And this is going to work the same way with a little bit of pressure and some friction. And with these spinning, it works a lot faster. These are available from different places online. These are made of cocobolo. I can't remember where I purchased them from, but I'm pretty sure if you just do a search for leather burnishing sticks or leather burnishing spools, you'll be able to come up with something pretty quick. These, like I say, these are cocobolo. You want a nice hardwood that are nice and smooth, and these work great for me. And you're going to use these the same way, whether it's on the water like this. Basically, you're just going to get it wet. You're going to turn it on. It's a lot faster. If you're doing something like straps, then this big wide one works really well. If you're doing something where you have to get into like smaller curves and stuff like that, then you're going to want a smaller spool more along these lines. And they've also, they've got different sizes. You can do edges with them, like really wide pieces as well if you have multiple layers to go together. And this works great with the water. This is the one I did with the water, and I just went over it, and it's getting nice and smooth, nice, good, clean, finished edge to it. It works fantastic with gum trag. If you want to do anything with the gum trag on it, then this is going to polish that right up nice and fast. And it also works with the beeswax because that friction starts to heat up that wax and kind of melt it into the edge. That's going to seal the edge up as well. But if you're going to use beeswax, then I found even there's a better method of doing that even than these. And this is a tip that an old leather worker told me. He's been doing it for years. And what this is a buffing wheel. And it's not an expensive one. It's just a cheap one that I picked up from the hardware store. I think I've got the package here. So just a simple Disco, I guess, brand here. And what I've done is I've heated up my beeswax and impregnated that into the cloth. So this is actually very firm and rigid now once that cools off and dries. And you may have to do this a little at a time. I used a heat gun to just kind of drip it in there and let it absorb and then work a groove into it. And it takes a little while to get this set up, but this is so much faster, especially when you're doing strapping and belt edges. So what I usually do just to get things started is I'll load it up. I keep my beeswax handy, load it up a little bit before I start. That puts a little bit of extra wax right in the groove here, and it starts to warm up. So once that wax gets nice and warm, you can pop it right on the edge here. Work it back and forth, and that's going to heat that beeswax up in there, and it's going to save you time because it's applying the finish and burnishing all at the same time. This is a nice, good, durable edge. As you can see, it's nice and flexible. Again, only use the beeswax after you've put whatever colored finishes, dyes, and on your leather, because once the beeswax is on there, more than anything, the beeswax will definitely hinder how your leather absorbs the dye. Same with the gum trag. Again, it's a much better idea to do your burnishing after you finish your leather. But get some scrap. Try your edging tool. Find out what thicknesses of leather versus what edging tool you like. The different brands have got different numbers on them, and they don't match up. So it's a little experiment. And then try your hand burnishing. And if you, like I said, if you got access to a drill press like this, then definitely, if you're going to do a bunch of this stuff, I highly recommend getting a buffing wheel and then heating up that wax and impregnating your buffing wheel with it. It's going to save you a lot of time. Hope you enjoyed this. Maybe it cleared some things up, and if it helps you along your way, then I'm happy. So if you're happy, give me a thumbs up, like and subscribe, and we'll try to do some more leather tips and tricks videos in the future. Thanks for watching.